Hey everyone, my name is Elizabeth and I'm going to share my project presentation. So this is basically just an overview of my project, my findings, and some things I learned along the way. So let's dive right in. The topic I chose for this project is a comprehensive guide to employee motivation. I chose the third project type, which is a literature review with a practical application guide for managers. So my two deliverables were the literature review and the application guide. So this study was an in-depth research analysis. It has published research, scholarly sources, case studies, very research heavy, and lots of proven tactics, all implemented within my review and the guide itself. So I'm just going to give you an overview of both the literature review and the guide, just to kind of give you a visual. So here is, oh, let's see. Here's a view of the comprehensive guide. This is nothing super exciting. It's Microsoft Word. This is just the paper itself. I start out with an abstract and then I just get right into the meat of the paper. This is all of my research combined into one place, all the contents, from very smart people and professionals who have studied all of these things for many years. And this is just me condensing it into a research paper. And so I just want to give that visual of the literature review itself, 20 something pages of content about motivation. So next, I wanted to show you the application guide. So I tried to link the paper and the guide so that everything that the review talks about, the guide covers in more of an easy to read format. So I made this guide for managers or any company leader looking to take their team to the next level. They can read this booklet and kind of figure out, oh, here are some literally practical application tips, like the title says, in this booklet that I can use right now in my company. And at least that was my goal. And so I start out with an author's note, table of contents, like any good guide would. And then I have the purpose of the guide. And then I go right into the definition of motivation and talk about the effects of employees who are motivated and the effects of unmotivated employees, and kind of showing people why you want motivated employees in your workplace and some of the benefits to that. I talk about how one size does not fit all when it comes to motivation. Motivating factors are not universal. There's no formula that you solve. It's super individualized and personal based on each and every employee, which is a really important aspect, and it's a big part of a big chunk of my review as well. Then I go into the types of motivation into more detail, and then theories cover hierarchy of needs, equity theory, two-factor, job characteristics model. Then I talk about how generation plays a huge part in employee motivation and how managers need to know how to motivate people who are born into different eras, because their mindset really is affected by not only the way that they grew up and but also the generation that raised them. And so I talk about these different generations and kind of ways that they are best motivated. I talk a little bit more extensively on millennials because, as you can see in the first line here, um, by 2025, they're going to encompass 75% of the workforce. So it's super important that managers know how to lead millennials well and also inspire them and encourage them towards being motivated the best that they can be within their company. And millennials are so different than any other generation, as each generation is within itself. But millennials are just very unique, and a manager learning about some of those quirks will help them and help their company. So I expand on that a little bit more and the importance of generational differences and knowing your employees, the role of a manager. I go into what I call the golden seven tactics for that managers can implement right away for motivating their employees. And so I go into that a little bit more in detail, and then I kind of wrap it up and go into references. So that is the guide. And then some challenging parts, streamlining the content. There's so much information on employee motivation, and I knew this was going to be an issue from the start. Just figuring out how to condense everything but still cover everything well was definitely a challenge, but something that I feel like I did well. I feel like I touched on the high points and was able to provide good examples of everything. And then linking the review and the guide was also tough, but definitely learning experience. I enjoyed the creativity. I learned a lot. I feel genuinely knowledgeable on motivation after all the research I did. But my main takeaways were that one size does not fit all. Motivating factors aren't universal. What works for one employee is so personal and unique based off of the individual. And so that's what makes it really tough for a manager because there's no standard practice for motivating others well. Like I said before, it's not a formula that you solve. A manager has to truly know each and every employee and then determine what steps to take on how to approach each person in order to succeed in understanding them and then motivating them well. So that was a huge takeaway. Also, generation, it plays a huge part in motivating and leading employees. So how a manager approaches a person based off of the generation they were born into is huge because each mindset is different. And age is a huge part of workplace diversity that I feel like doesn't get talked about too much. And so learning that effectively catering to each generation and the people within it can affect recruiting, retention, maintaining productivity, change, team building, all of the things. So it's super important. Learning more about millennials, which I kind of touched on before, huge part of the workforce. So just learning how to motivate them well was a huge takeaway. And then also, the role of a manager is so important. And I think sometimes maybe even underrated. A Gallup poll says that more than two-thirds of employee motivation is a direct result from their manager's influence. So learning how important the managerial role is and how if they can play a small part in creating a workplace environment that has strong motivational aspects, not only will the company be better, but each individual will be sharpened as well. So, those are my main takeaways. And I hope you learned something from this presentation. I hope you enjoy the content and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks. Bye, guys.